Uh, Thank you so much for having me. I and Rajiv go back a very long time. When this book was first launched, I was a deputy director research. I was deputy director research in the Vivekanand International Foundation. And the director then was the legendary Mr. Ajit Doval, Kirti Chakra, the National Security Advisor of India, hands-on National Security Advisor, most active, rather I would say proactive in matters of that pertain to India's national security. And he told me that this is a book that must be a primer, and we must do everything in our power to propagate its central message, its forecast, its warning forecast, because the nation needs to be sensitized. The nation needs to know, as my friend Arnab Goswami is fond of saying, the nation needs to know. I think we need to know. We are under a concerted informational attack of trying to seek out and, widen our fault line, identify every fault line in Indian society and make sure that it is used to break up India. So the title of the book was Explicit Breaking India. Because that exact project had been started by the British, shaken them to the core. They never anticipated that a society so caste, dominated by divisions and fault lines of caste, creed, language, religion, resistance to British rule, to British penetration of our society, to British attempts at proselytizing, right? And they were shaken. So they managed to quell that revolt. Unfortunately, we had no unified leadership. The only ranks primarily, which was very strongly affected a bit in the Bombay Presidency Army and not so much in the Madras Presidency Army, though a little bit, yes. But the fact of the matter was that it was the Indian soldiers who revolted. And the Indian soldiers, the highest rank that they held at POs, Havaldars, Nayaks, and Lot Nayak, the military training, the kind of vision with which they could have, led that war at the level of general. Because catapulting man much. And therefore, the revolt took place in bits and pieces. Had all the 80,000 Indian troops revolted at one time, the Raj would have been taken. And then the British very cleverly then used the Sikhs. The Sikhs had just been defeated by the Purbaiyas, as they call them contemptuously, of the British Indian Army, and they hated them for it. So they stayed out of this revolt, and the British fully exploited that. And then don't forget that the Sikhs were the military arm of Hinduism. Its revolt against the tyrannical Aurangzeb. It's sort of against Mughal tyranny. They were every family for the freedom from oppression. The British now, integrated, absorbed the Sikh mass scale into the British Indian Army and the Punjabi Muslims and the hill tribes who had largely stayed aloof. And then they now insisted that recruitment to the Sikh regiment would be only for the Keshdharis, not the Namdharis. Otherwise, my ancestors were part of the Sikh, military renaissance. Bhai Mati Das, Bhai Sati Das, they are from my family line. Banda Bairagi, Punjab. So all the families in the Punjab used to contribute one ton to the Khalsa to fight against Mughal over the tyranny. And it's a fact that in 1 century, they had uprooted and overthrown the Mughal Empire, and under Ranjit Singh, the Sikhs had gone and captured parts of Afghanistan. So all the territory of West Pakistan now was under Sikh rule, and they had gone up to Jalalabad in Afghanistan, and they held it, they ruled it. Hari Singh Nalwa was the governor. So the first fault line that the British created was between the Hindus and the Sikhs. And they are now trying to widen this fault line to resuscitate some kind of a terrorist movement in the Punjab under their project, Kashmir Khalistan project. They are to somehow spark off in the Punjab. It's not for want of trying. The next fault line that they really addressed was the caste fault line. Please don't forget that after 1857, the British, and for this they said, identify every fault line in the society and break it up so thoroughly that it will never get together for a combined revolt against the Raj. The most significant fault line that they identified was of caste. The word caste comes from the Portuguese word casta. There is no word called caste in Sanskrit, in Hindi. There was no word called caste till the British introduced it by using the Portuguese word casta. And, the first author of the first caste-based census in India, the name is just slipping, it will just come back to me, but he famously went on record to state he held the first caste-based census in 1872. And he famously went on record to say that as long as there is caste, there will be no India. Sir, today your entire political discourse is dominated by caste and caste equation, and all political parties are fighting on the basis of caste. You have your students stuck in Ukraine. Why did they have to go there? Because 50% seats in medical colleges are reserved on the basis of caste. The British never had added an economic dimension to caste. You've done it, and congratulations to you. You split this country in such a thorough manner that even the British could not achieve that. Now the British are only trying to widen those caste fault lines. You've given them that opportunity. Why can't we shift from the sub-identity of caste, go back to, if you want to carry on with affirmative action, with reservation, if you can't live without it, it was meant to be for a short time. Even Ambedkar said so. He had a time horizon of 20, 30, 40 years. This has gone on for 75, and at this rate, it will go on for 7,500 years. I mean, this is utter nonsense. Why can't you make reservations in colleges, in jobs, based upon the economic criteria? Help the poor India industrializes. When a society urbanizes, caste becomes irrelevant. It was stuck into the agricultural era. You are trying to make caste, you've given it a new lease of relevance post-independence, which is despicable, it is horrible. I mean, the colonial masters, we can understand their need to divide and rule. Why are you doing it to the fault line, caste barriers? The RSS was at the forefront of that effort, and soon they burnt their electoral fingers in Uttar Pradesh. I mean, the bastion of caste, and in Bihar and other places, And they quickly recoiled and they went back, and their caste calculation, OBC, Maha OBC, etc., are far more complex than it was in the British period. We just can't seem to get ourselves above the fault lines that the British imposed upon us, and now they are available to each and every one of our adversaries to exploit to the hilt. And the worst fault line in this caste equation is the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe fault. Scheduled castes have been activated now in a very major way. Bhim Army, Panther Army, etc. Host of armies, whole host of fault line was first exploited in Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Assam, Bodos, Boros as they call themselves. And then it has now spread to central India, to the Bhil, the Gond, the Mundas, all the Central Asian tribes are in full-scale revolt, instigated from outside and aided and abetted by our own stupidity. And it has become so lethal that in one ambush, the Maoists have killed 75 CRPF troopers, which is being celebrated in some colleges and universities. The left is the biggest rear guard of the empire that we have seen. They are they took charge of our academia. Why? India ceded its academia to left and, religious rear guard. I cannot understand. We handed over our syllabi, we handed over our this thing, and 3 to 4 education ministers in a row were from a particular community, and it had its toxic impact. It had its toxic impact. So the caste fault line also finds its extension in the north-south for you, the Max Mullers and the Mortimer Wheelers. They rewrote your history. They foisted a history on you that the Indus Valley civilization was Dravidian, that the Aryans were invaders. So what was the rationale for this historical infliction? Chor, chor, musere bhai. Tum chor, hum bhi chor. You are invaders, we are invaders. So what are you bitching about? What are you craving about colonial British colonizing India? It shows that there is no difference in the genes north and south of the Indias. There is no difference, and if there was in Tamil literature any record of a retreat from the Indus to, the Kaveri and the Krishna and the Godavari, it finds mention, the rivers that you cross find mention, and you impose your set of names, you get the old names and impose them on the new rivers that you come to. It's utter nonsense. Now we have found the first denial was there was no Saraswati river. Because the Saraswati, existence of the Saraswati demolishes the entire Aryan invasion argument. We have got satellite imagery evidence. We've got, the paleological studies evidence, etc., genetic evidence to show that there was a Saraswati. And what is more likely is that there was an out of India migration, not an into India migration. So that takes care of that Dravidian fault line. But as Rajiv pointed out so presciently, and I'm talking of a decade plus back, when this book was released in the Vivekanand International Foundation, it was like a seismic event. And the then director of the foundation was very keen that this should be spread all over. In fact, I must, the first chance that I get, go back to him and remind him to make sure that this is introduced into the syllabi of the Sardar Patel IPS Academy, of the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy at Mussoorie. And Rajiv, I would request you that the time has come for you to come back to India on a crusade to spread this mission, to sensitize the people, sensitize the bureaucracy. The local people, may I assure you, Rajiv, through the social media, this has become the dominant narrative. The people are very, very well aware. And now the BJP, RSS are making inroads south of the Vindhya. Karnataka is with you today, etc. And we will go further south. Because these specious, narratives created, foisted on us by the British are getting demolished. But that demolition exercise now must require an urgency, and for which you will have to come here. You will have to come here. You will have to preach to our bureaucrats, to our IPS guys. We'll try and see if we can get you towards the National Defence College, where the brightest and the best of the armed forces come. And in fact, you must speak there, because they also have people from IPS, IFS. You must speak to the IFS Academy. How is it that they don't know about Indian narrative? How is it that those youngsters are totally brainwashed by the court historian? They quite obviously, to pass his exam, Romila Thapar is the caste queen. To pass his exam of the independence movement, it is Bipin Chandra Pal, that court bootlicker. And now the Raman Chandra Guhas of the world, and the Irfan Habibs and the others of the world who have dominated the narrative. If any guy has to get into the IAS, the textbook is Romila Thapar. The textbook is Irfan Habib. The textbook is Bipin Chandra Pal. And the highest levels of distortion are in ancient Indian history and in modern Indian history. The freedom struggle. The role of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, who wanted to take this country beyond caste, creed, language, ethnic barriers and fault lines. Is the greatest contribution of that man. Had he taken charge, we would have had a different India today. We would have a modern country instead of a caste bastion. A bastion of caste more deeply entrenched than it was in the times of the empire. Thanks to these leftist subaltern historians, these foot soldiers, as you call them, of the empire, this deserter, this leftover of the empire, who've taken it upon themselves to see that these brown, people, these black, non-white people cannot change a word of what Max Muller said. Did Max Muller have access to satellite data? Did Max Muller have access to paleo channel mapping? Did Max Muller have access to the kind of archaeological evidence that B.B. Lal and the others and Bisht and the others have taken out? Did he have access to radiocarbon dating? You see, this is that slavish colonial mindset. They have psychologically enslaved you. You've not been able to break those psychological chains. That you still think Max Muller is the last word. What the hell was he? What was his claim to fame? As per him, the world started in 4500 BC. So how could the Vedas have come anything earlier than 1500 BC? Back of the envelope calculation. Gospel truth. Dare you try and change it? Your Rajiv, 7 years of BJP, not one textbook has been changed. Rajiv, you have to come back. The Kurukshetra is here. The Dharmakshetra is here. I know we have reached through the social media, and I'm glad you have revived. I'm very sorry that you were unwell, but you look better now. You look better now. And may I call upon you, you must prepare, and we will now target the decision, IPS Academy, the National Defence College, the Staff College, because this narrative must be shared. This narrative must be spread. It must become the dominant. You see, the continuity, the cultural which they found little terracotta dolls of women with vermilion in the center parting of their head. You found terracotta still in meditation postures. Dhi and yoga, dhi for dhyana and yoga. These are the hallmarks of the Indian civilization. They are by carbon dating 9,500 years old. And there are some evidence that it is even older. Ages are being pushed back in Taipei and Turkey and the other places. They are being pushed back. We must do some of this again. Mera Gar, almost to 7,000 years plus. And the Saraswati civilization is up to 9,000 years plus. At Birhana, where the IIT Kharagpur did carbon dating, they've done fluoride dating. So when are you going to integrate this data to change the historical paradigm? In the hard sciences, physics, chemistry, biochemistry, we've done a lot of advances. Our students are doing very well. But in the social sciences, we have a leftist liberal clique of foot soldiers, sepoys of the Raj, which are holding sway. And this government being in power after 7 years cannot change that, because I find the bureaucracy is convinced that we can't change history with the change of every government. We can't saffronize history. Sir, we are not asking you to saffronize history. We are asking you to put your history on an empirical, factual basis of the truth. The truth concerns us all. You cannot inherit narratives from the empire which were designed to divide and rule, which were designed to justify, our constitution, Rajiv. It starts with, it is by the way a reprint of the 1935 Government of India Act, right? By and large, it doesn't start with liberty, social justice. And let me delve a little into the background of social justice. Social justice came from a British concept of imperial justice. What was imperial justice, sir? Imperial justice was that the people of India are so fragmented socially, linguistically, ethnically, caste-wise, creed-wise, etc., 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 that they will keep squabbling amongst themselves, and no government, indigenous Indian government, will be above its caste, caste connection, caste predilection, or religious predilections, or ethnic or linguistic predilections. They will be unfair to the other. The only people who can be just are the British. So India can be ruled in a just fashion only by people from outside. That was the imperial justice concept. Our constitution deftly changed imperial justice to social justice, and they said that the anointed rulers of India now is the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty, Anglophiles of the Raj, collaborators of the Raj, who must now rule. They are only because, he was educated in Eton and Harrow, Old chap, so proper he was. Only that dynasty is fit to rule. And they ruled. Almost 60 years they have ruled non-stop. It's only now that a churn has taken place and the social media came. Because they had a stranglehold on the print media, they had a stranglehold on the electronic media, the Doordarshan of that era. You see, now it is time for change. Now it is time that we must resume that charge. A decade back, you would come to us, decade plus, I think now it is, when the Vivekananda International Foundation had hosted that book launch. And now that book is more relevant than ever. And I would just request you one word, Rajiv, because you are in the United States. There is a Professor Mithi Mukherjee who's written a book, In the Shadow of the Raj. One of the best accounts of British India's shenanigans in this country and what it did to enslave us psychologically, to dominate our historical narratives, to spin doctor our history. And the Raj the empire has just shifted from this side of the Atlantic to the other side, as you rightly pointed out. You've been leading a valiant fight back in the other side of the new empire, which seems to be tottering a bit with the with what it has done in Afghanistan and now in Ukraine. So I think we leave that tottering empire to itself, get the battle back to where the key result area is in the Indian subcontinent, and health permitting, I would request you to now come in first. There is
Thank you.
there is a great amount that can be put across in a face-to-face interaction. Let them see you not just on their screen. Let them dominate you. I would like you to dominate their hearts and minds. We have to fight a battle for the hearts and minds of the Indian population. The ground is ready. It's receptive in the lingua franca, in the local languages. There is a lot of churn, lot of change, and but like I said, we need to target this time, and I'll try and speak to Doval Sahib, because there is now a need to see that we reach out to the decision, to reach out to those who very they actually are doing it from a lot of, I suppose, a sense of duty that we can't change history with every change in the government. So they are quite convinced. What is their history? The history I read to pass my IAS, IPS, IRS exam. That is the history, sir. That is our narrative. And every nation has a foundational narrative of state. We outsold, we outsourced this foundational narrative to the empire, and what is left of it is now coming from where you are, from the United States. No country outsources its history. The Chinese history is not written by the Americans or the British, nor is the Russian, nor is the French history. Why should the history of a cultural, civilizational state, the size of India, the population of India, be outsourced to London and now to Harvard or wherever? So for that, we fought valiantly there. We've taken them on their own intellectual turf, shown them the hollowness of their argument by the Paksha, Purva Paksha approach. Now that approach has to be brought to India to sensitize our bureaucracy, police, civil, military, to the truth. For the truth, Rajiv concerns us all. More power to your pen. I would request you to come out with a second enlarged edition of this, where I would request if you can ask Mithi Mukherjee to add a chapter, historical chapter, to which is a seamless link between between colonized India and post-colonized India. That linkage she has established very well, and that deals with a lot of other things. Take her under your wing, your broad shoulders and your very wide feathers. We would like you to fly to India. Thank
Thank you,
you.
General Bakshi.
Jai Bharat. Jai
Jai
Hind.
Bharat.